Zara-chan walked through the long hallways of Galactic Unity Academy with her old backpack hanging from her shoulder. She kept her eyes down, watching the shiny floor beneath her feet. The school was huge and filled with strange sounds. Alien students clicked their teeth, made whistling noises, and growled as they talked to their friends. All these sounds mixed together made Zara feel like she was in a noisy zoo. The academy was the best school in the galaxy. Students from dozens of different alien worlds came here to study. Their parents were important people like space ambassadors, rich traders, and alien kings and queens. Humans had only joined this school recently. Many aliens still thought humans were just lucky newcomers who got into the Galactic Federation by accident. Zara found an empty seat in her advanced xenobiology class. She tried not to look at the other students who were staring at her. Compared to them, she looked very plain and boring. The Vorthic students had beautiful shiny scales that changed colors in the light. The Aquari had long flowing arms like octopus tentacles. The Zilith had crystal spikes growing from their foreheads that sparkled like diamonds. Zara was just a regular human, girl with brown hair and brown eyes. She pulled out her old datapad and pretended to read her notes. The device was scratched and dented, not like the expensive new tablets the other students carried. Around her, conversations flowed in many different alien languages. Some sounded like music, others like grinding rocks, and a few like bubbling water. A tall Vorthic student sitting behind her leaned forward and whispered to his friend in their hissing language. Zara did not understand the words, but she heard them laugh quietly. She had a feeling they were talking about her. During lunch, Zara sat alone at a small table in the corner of the huge cafeteria. The room was filled with the strangest smells she had ever experienced. Some alien foods smelled like flowers, others like old socks, and many like things she could not even describe. She ate her simple human meal while watching the other students. Groups of alien teenagers sat together, laughing and sharing colorful foods that glowed, bubbled, or moved on their own. They all seemed to know each other well and belonged to tight friend groups. Zara wondered if she would ever fit in anywhere. A small group of Aquari students at a nearby table kept looking at her with their large, curious eyes. One of them floated over to her table. The Aquari moved by swimming through the air using their tentacle arms. "Are you the new human student?" The Aquari asked in a voice that sounded like singing. "I am Carl. We have never met a human before." Zara nodded and tried to smile. "I am Zara. Nice to meet you. Is it true that humans can only breathe one type of air?" Carl asked with genuine interest. "And that you cannot change your body temperature?" "Yes, that is true," Zara answered. She was used to these kinds of questions about human biology. More Aquari students gathered around, asking questions about Earth and human customs. They seemed friendly and truly curious, not mean or mocking. For a moment, Zara felt hopeful that maybe she could make some friends here. But then a loud, harsh voice cut through their conversation. Well, what do we have here?" Zara looked up to see 3 large alien students approaching their table. The leader was a massive Vorthic with dark green scales and bright yellow eyes. He was at least 7 feet tall and twice as wide as Zara. Behind him stood a huge, rocky-looking Gorlock and a thin Zilith, with sharp crystal spikes covering his head. The Aquari students quickly moved away from Zara's table, swimming back to their own seats. Carl gave Zara an apologetic look before leaving. "I am Krexstar," the Vorthic said, looking down at Zara with his reptilian eyes. "My family owns mining companies on 12 different planets. And you are the little human who thinks she belongs here." Zara said nothing. She had learned long ago that sometimes staying quiet was the best choice. "Did you hear me, mammal?" Krexstar leaned closer. His breath smelled like rotting meat. "I asked you a question." "I heard you," Zara said softly. still looking at her food. Krextar laughed, a sound like grinding stones. At least it can talk. Tell me, human, how did your backward species trick the Federation into letting you join? Did you beg? Did you promise to be good pets? The other two aliens laughed at their leader's joke. Students at nearby tables turned to watch, but no one moved to help Zara. My species earned its place in the Federation, Zara replied quietly. Earned? The Zilith named Nexus spoke up, his voice sharp and cutting. Humans barely knew how to leave their own planet 50 years ago. You were still fighting wars with metal bullets and chemical explosives. Primitive. Very primitive, agreed the Gorlak called. Thrum. His voice was deep and slow like rolling thunder. Krextar picked up Zara's datapad and examined it. Look at this ancient technology. Is this the best your poor species can afford? How embarrassing. He held the device high above his head, pretending to drop it. Zara remained calm, but her hands tightened into fists under the table. Please give that back, she said. Please? Krextar mocked her. How polite. Maybe if you ask nicely, I might consider it. A teacher walking by noticed the commotion and approached their table. It was Professor Zenth, an elderly crystalline being who taught galactic history. Is everything all right here? Professor Zenth asked. Of course, Professor, Krextar said smoothly, handing Zara's datapad back to her. We were just welcoming our new human classmate to the academy. Professor Zenth looked at Zara with concern. Miss Chun, are you having any problems adjusting to academy life? Zara met the teacher's glowing eyes and shook her head. No problems, Professor. Everything is fine. The professor looked like he wanted to say more, but then the lunch bell rang. Students began clearing their tables and heading to their next classes. See you around, human, Krextar said as he and his friends walked away. We should talk more often. As Zara packed up her things, she noticed that the cafeteria had grown quiet. Other students were still looking at her, but now their expressions were different. Some looked curious, others seemed worried, and a few appeared to be judging whether she was worth their time. Carl High swam past her table and whispered quietly, I am sorry we left. Krextar is very powerful here. His family has influence with the Academy Board. Zara nodded. I understand. Thank you for trying to be friendly. That afternoon, Zara walked to her next class alone, thinking about her first real day at the academy. She had faced much worse situations than dealing with a school bully, but something about Krextar's casual cruelty reminded her of things she wanted to forget. She pulled her backpack straps tighter and prepared for whatever would come next. Over the next few days, Krextar and his friends made Zara's life at the academy very difficult. They seemed to find her everywhere she went. In the hallways between classes, they would bump into her hard enough to make her drop her books. When she bent down to pick them up, they would kick her belongings across the floor. During study period in the library, Thrum would sit at the table next to her and eat foods that smelled terrible. The thick, sour odor made it hard for Zara to concentrate on her reading. When she looked up at him, he would smile with his huge, rocky teeth and say, Sorry, human. Golak food too strong for a weak mammal nose. In advanced physics class, Nexus would make loud comments about human intelligence whenever the teacher asked Zara a question. Humans can barely understand simple math, he would whisper to other students. How can they learn real physics? Even when Zara answered questions correctly, which she always did, Nexus would say things like, lucky guess, or someone must have helped her cheat. The worst incident happened during lunch on Thursday. Zara was carrying her tray of food to an empty table when Krextar suddenly stepped in front of her. She could not stop in time and walked straight into his large-scaled body. Her lunch tray went flying. The human food splattered all over Krextar's expensive school uniform. Purple sauce dripped down his shirt, and thick soup covered his shoes. "You clumsy mammal!" Krekstar roared. "Look what you did to my clothes!" The entire cafeteria went silent. Hundreds of alien students turned to stare at them. Zara's heart pounded, but she kept her voice calm. "I am sorry. It was an accident." "An accident?" Krekstar grabbed the front of her shirt and lifted her slightly off the ground. "These clothes cost more money than your family makes in a year." "Let her go, Krekstar." Professor Zenth appeared beside them. "Put the student down immediately." Krekstar slowly released Zara. "Of course, Professor. I was just upset about my uniform. This human crashed into me and ruined everything." Professor Zenth looked at the mess on the floor, then at Krekstar's position near the empty tables. It was obvious that the Vorthik had stepped in front of Zara on purpose. "Miss Chun, are you hurt?" the professor asked. "I am fine," Zara said quietly. "Good. Krekstar, report to the headmaster's office after lunch." "Miss Chun, please go get another meal from the kitchen staff." As Professor Zenth walked away, Krekstar leaned close to Zara's ear. "This is not over, human," he whispered. "No one makes me look stupid in front of the whole school." Later that day, Krekstar returned from the headmaster's office with just a warning. His family's donations to the academy apparently carried a lot of weight. The harassment got worse after that. Krekstar began spreading rumors about humans throughout the school. He told other students that humans smelled bad because they could only wash with water instead of proper cleaning chemicals. He said that humans were so primitive, they still grew their own food and dirt like animals. He claimed that human females were weak and cried easily when stressed. Many students seemed to believe these lies. Zara noticed that fewer aliens would sit near her in class. When she walked past groups of students, they would sometimes hold their breathing apparatus or cover their scent organs, pretending that she smelled terrible. The Aquari students who had been friendly on her first day now avoided her completely. Carl Hai would not even make eye contact when they passed in the hallways. Some alien students remained neutral. They did not bully Zara, but they also did not help her or try to be friends. They watched from a distance as Krekstar and his gang continued their daily harassment. A few students seemed to disapprove of the bullying, but they were too afraid of Krekstar's social power to speak up. His family's wealth and influence reached throughout the academy and beyond. During Galactic history class, the teacher assigned students to work in pairs on a research project about the integration conflicts. These were the recent wars that led to humans joining the Galactic Federation. "Miss Chun," the teacher announced, "you will work with..." She looked around the classroom. No one volunteered to be Zara's partner. The teacher frowned. "Krekstar, you will work with Miss Chun on this project." Krekstar's yellow eyes glowed with mean satisfaction. "Of course, teacher. I would love to work with our human classmate." After class, Krekstar cornered Zara in the hallway. Thrum and Nexus stood behind him like bodyguards. "So, human, we get to work together on a project about your species' little wars," Krekstar said. "This should be interesting. You can tell me all about how humans got lucky against superior alien forces." "The integration conflicts were not just luck," Zara said. "Humans fought bravely to protect their colonies and prove they belonged in the galaxy." Nexus laughed, his crystal spikes glittering. "Bravely? Your people barely survived first contact. If the Federation Council had not taken pity on you, humans would still be stuck on their little blue planet." "My grandfather fought in those wars," Thrum added in his deep voice. He said humans were like angry insects, dangerous in large groups, but easy to crush when alone. Krekstar stepped closer to Zara. "Here is how our project will work, mammal. You will do all the research and write the entire report. I will present it to the class and take credit for the work. If you complain to any teacher, I'll make sure every student in this academy knows that humans are weak, lying creatures who cannot be trusted. Zara stared at him without speaking. Inside her mind, she was remembering other faces, other threats, other moments when someone had tried to make her feel small and helpless. But those memories belonged to a different time and a different version of herself. "Do you understand me?" Krekstar demanded. "I understand," Zara said quietly. "Good. I want the first draft on my datapad by tomorrow morning." Krekstar and his friends walked away, laughing among themselves. That night in her small dormitory room, Zara sat at her desk and stared at her assignment. She was supposed to research the battles where humans had fought alien forces for the right to join the galactic community. She was supposed to write about the courage and sacrifice of human soldiers who had died defending their people. But how could she write about those wars without writing about herself? She opened her datapad and began typing. She wrote about the basic facts that any student could find in the academy library. Dates, locations, troop numbers, final outcomes. She kept everything simple and factual, avoiding details that might reveal too much thought as she worked. Zara tried not to think about the faces of the soldiers she had served with. She tried not to remember the sound of plasma rifles firing or the smell of burned metal after space battles. She tried not to think about the friends who would not live long enough to attend school or worry about homework assignments. But the memories came anyway, like they always did in the quiet moments. And for just a second, Zara let herself wonder what would happen if Krekstar knew who he was really dealing with. 2 weeks later, all the students at Galactic Unity Academy went on a field trip to the Galactic War Memorial Museum. The massive building was built into an asteroid that orbited the Academy's star system. It contained exhibits about every major conflict in galactic history. Zara walked with her classmates through the museum's entrance hall. Above them, holographic displays showed space battles from thousands of years of galactic warfare. The ceiling was covered with tiny lights representing every star system where major battles had been fought. Professor Zenth led the group through different sections of the museum. First, they visited halls dedicated to the ancient insectoid wars, where six-legged creatures had tried to conquer the galaxy 3,000 years ago. Then they saw exhibits about the Crystal Rebellion, where the Zilith had fought for independence from an old galactic empire. Krekstar walked near the front of the group with his friends. As they passed each exhibit, he made loud comments about the superior fighting abilities of his people, the Vorthik. "My ancestors were the greatest warriors in the galaxy," he bragged. "They conquered 12 star systems before they were even adults." Finally, the group reached the newest section of the museum. This area was dedicated to the integration conflicts, the recent wars that had decided which species could join the current Galactic Federation. The human section was smaller than most others, but it was packed with detailed information. Holographic displays showed human colonies under attack from alien forces. Other exhibits explained how humans had used unusual tactics to survive battles against larger, more advanced armies. Krekstar immediately began making fun of the human exhibits. "Look at this primitive technology," he said, pointing at a display of human weapons. They were still using metal bullets and chemical explosives. How did they expect to fight real space forces with toys like these? Nexus joined in the mockery. And look how small their ships were. Vorthik fighters could destroy 10 human ships without taking damage. The museum says humans were brave, Thrum read from an information panel. But bravery without strength is just stupidity. Other students gathered around to listen. Some laughed at the jokes, while others looked uncomfortable but said nothing. Zara walked slowly through the human section, reading every display carefully. She saw information about battles she remembered, planets she had visited, and weapons she had used. But all the exhibits were written for people who had not been there. They described the events like history lessons, not like lived experiences. Then she reached the memorial wall. It was a long, Black wall covered with thousands of names written in glowing letters. These were the humans who had died during the integration conflicts. The names were organized by battle, with the largest sections dedicated to the worst defeats. Zara stopped walking. Her breath became shallow, and her hands began to shake slightly. She found the section labeled Siege of Kepler 442 and began reading the names. Johnson, Marcus A. Rodriguez, Elena M. Patel, Raj K. Williams, Sarah J. These were people she had known. People she had served with. People she had watched. Further down the wall was another section. Last stand at Europa Station. More names. More friends. More faces that would never grow old. Thompson. Michael R. Zara whispered the name to herself. Mike had been 19 years old, just 2 years older than she was now. He had saved her life twice before taking plasma fire to the chest during the final evacuation. Chun. David W. Her cousin David, who had joined the military because she had. He died holding a corridor so civilian transports could escape. He was supposed to graduate from engineering school the week after the battle ended. Behind her, Krekstar was still making jokes about human military failures. "Look at all these names," he said loudly. "So many dead humans. They must have been terrible fighters to lose so many soldiers." Other students gathered around him, some nodding in agreement. "My father says humans only won battles because they were lucky," a young Zilla student said, "and because other species felt sorry for them." "Exactly right," Krekstar replied. "Humans are weak. They cannot protect themselves properly. How did creatures like this convince anyone they deserve to join civilized species?" Zara stared at the memorial wall and felt something breaking inside her chest. These names were not just casualties in some ancient war. They were her friends, her family, her brothers and sisters who had died protecting people they had never met. "What's wrong, human?" Krekstar had noticed that she had stopped moving. He walked over to where she stood in front of the memorial wall. "Are you upset reading about your species' failures?" The other students formed a circle around them. Even some teachers had stopped to watch what was happening. "These people were not failures," Zara said quietly, still facing the wall. "No?" Krekstar moved closer, his voice getting louder. "Then why are they dead? Why are their names on this wall if they were such great warriors?" "They died protecting others." Krekstar laughed. "Protecting others?" "They died because they were weak and unprepared. My people would never have lost so many soldiers in these simple battles." "Your people never faced the Dominion fleet," Zara said, her voice still quiet but carrying a strange edge. "What did you say?" Krekstar leaned closer. Several students took a step back without knowing why. "I said your people never faced the Dominion fleet at Kepler 442. 3,000 humans held that colony against 2 Vorthok battle groups for 6 months. Your generals said it was impossible." The museum had become very quiet. Even students looking at other exhibits had stopped to listen. "How do you know about specific battle details?" Nexus asked suspiciously. "That information is not in these basic exhibits." Zara slowly turned around to face the group of students. When she looked up at Krekstar, something in her expression made the large Vorthok take a step backward. "Because I was there." The silence that followed was complete. Not a single student moved or spoke. "You are lying," Krekstar said, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. "Am I?" Zara's posture changed slightly. Her spine straightened, her shoulders squared, and her head came up. The quiet, scared schoolgirl was gone, replaced by something harder and more dangerous. "Tell me, Krekstar, what do you know about the Battle of the Asteroid Fields? Or the evacuation of Europa Station? Do you know how many civilians escaped those battles? Do you know what it cost to save them?" Some students were pulling out their datapads. searching for information about the battles Zara had mentioned. "I know humans got lucky," Krekstar said. But he sounded less certain now. Lucky. Zara repeated the word like it tasted bitter. 47 civilian transports escaped from Europa Station. 47 ships full of families, children, elderly people who could not fight for themselves. 23 humans died buying time for those ships to reach hyperspace. She looked around the circle of students. Many were staring at their datapads with shocked expressions. I was 15 years old, commanding a squad of Marines twice my age. We held the main corridor for 18 hours against Zoloth assault troops while the evacuation ships loaded passengers. Professor Zenth pushed through the crowd of students. "Miss Chan, what exactly are you saying?" Zara met his eyes directly. "I am saying that I am not just some random human student who wandered into your academy." "Professor." She turned back to Krekstar, who was now looking very uncomfortable. "You want to know about human military failures? Let me tell you about human military successes. The integration conflicts lasted 3 years. Humans fought against 7 different alien species who wanted to keep us out of the Federation. We were outnumbered 50 to 1. Our technology was decades behind yours. Our ships were smaller, our weapons were weaker, and our soldiers were mostly teenagers who had never seen space combat before. More students were gathering, drawn by the tension in the air. But we won. Not because we were lucky. Not because other species felt sorry for us. We won because humans have something that your advanced civilizations had forgotten how to use. What is that supposed to mean?" Nexus demanded. Zara looked at the memorial wall one more time, reading the names of friends she would never see again. "We knew how to die for something more important than ourselves." The museum had become completely silent. Even the background hum of the environmental systems seemed to quiet down as every student and teacher focused on the confrontation in front of the memorial wall. Krekstar stood frozen, staring at the small human girl who no longer seemed small at all. Something fundamental had changed in the way she carried herself. Her voice, her posture, even the way she breathed was different. "You are making this up," he said, but his voice cracked slightly. "You are just a student. A child. Check your datapad," Zara said calmly. "Search for Lieutenant Colonel Zara Chun, 47th Human Expeditionary Force." Several students were already typing frantically into their devices. A few gasped audibly as search results appeared on their screens. "Professor." Zenth pulled out his own datapad and searched for the name. His crystalline features shifted to display shock as information filled his screen. "This cannot be correct," he said slowly. "According to the Federation military database, Lieutenant Colonel Zara Chun received the Galactic Cross for extraordinary valor during the siege of Kepler 442. She was promoted to Lieutenant Colonel at age 15, making her the youngest field commander in human military history." More students were reading from their datapads now, sharing information in whispers. "It says she led the defense of 3 separate colony worlds during the integration conflicts," a young Aquari student read aloud. "She received the Solar Defense Medal, the Federation Star, and 3 Purple Hearts for wounds received in combat. Purple Hearts are medals humans give to soldiers who are injured fighting for others," Professor Zenth explained to the alien students. 3 Purple Hearts means she was wounded in battle 3 separate times and continued serving. Nexus was shaking his head in disbelief. "The database must be wrong. Look at her. She is just a small human female. How could someone like this command military units?" "Someone like this?" Zara's voice carried a dangerous edge. "You mean someone young? Someone female? Someone human?" She stepped closer to Nexus, and the crystalline alien instinctively backed away. "Let me tell you what someone like me did during the war. Nexus. At the Battle of the Asteroid Fields, my destroyer was cut off from the main human fleet. We were surrounded by 12 Zilith heavy cruisers. Standard military procedure said we should surrender to save the crew. The circle of students had grown larger. Even aliens from other school groups were gathering to listen. Instead, I ordered my ship to ram the enemy command vessel. We destroyed their flagship and created enough confusion for the rest of the human fleet to escape. 47 Zilith ships were hunting us that day. Only 12 made it back to their base. That is impossible, Nexus protested. One human ship against 12 Zilith cruisers? The tactical computers would show it was hopeless. Human commanders do not always listen to computers, Zara replied. We listened to our hearts. And my heart told me that saving my people was worth more than following safe, logical procedures. Thrum spoke up, his deep voice rumbling through the museum hall. My grandfather commanded Gorlak forces during the integration conflicts. He told me stories about human tactics that made no sense. He said human soldiers would fight impossible battles instead of retreating to safety. Your grandfather was a good warrior, Zara said, turning to face the massive rocky alien. I fought against Gorlak units 3 times. They were brave and honorable opponents. But they could not understand why humans would sacrifice themselves for strangers. Explain it to me, Thrum said. He sounded genuinely curious now, not mocking. Zara looked around the circle of alien faces. Some appeared shocked, others seemed interested, and a few looked skeptical but were listening carefully. During the evacuation of Europa Station, we had 6 hours to load civilian transports before the Zilith fleet arrived. Command ordered all military personnel to retreat and abandon the colony. The civilians would have to surrender and hope for mercy. She paused, remembering that day with perfect clarity. I was the ranking human officer on the station, 15 years old and responsible for 800 Marines. I could have followed orders. I could have saved my soldiers and let the civilians face their fate alone. Why did you not? Ask Coral High, the friendly Aquari who had spoken to Zara on her first day at the academy. Because that is not who humans are, Zara answered simply. We stayed. We held the station corridors while families loaded onto transport ships. We fought Zilith assault troops in hand-to-hand combat when our ammunition ran out. We used furniture and tools as weapons when our rifles stopped working. Professor Zenth was reading more information from his datapad. The official report says 23 human Marines died during the Europa Station evacuation, but 47 civilian ships escaped safely, carrying over 30,000 refugees. 30,000 lives, Zara repeated. 30,000 parents and children and grandparents who got to see their families again. 23 Marines decided that was a fair trade. The museum had filled with students and teachers from other tour groups. Word was spreading quickly that something extraordinary was happening in the human section. Krekstar finally found his voice again. Even if this is true, why are you here? Why are you pretending to be a normal student instead of living as a war hero? For the first time since the confrontation began, Zara's expression softened slightly. Because I wanted to be normal, she said. I wanted to attend school and learn about alien cultures and maybe make friends. I wanted to be a teenager instead of a soldier. She looked back at the memorial wall, reading the names one more time. I retired from the military after the war ended. I was 16 years old and had seen enough fighting for 10 lifetimes. The Federation offered me a position at the academy because they thought having a human war hero as a student would be good for diplomatic relations. So you came here to be a symbol? Nexus said. No, I came here to be myself. Zara turned back to face the crowd. I wanted to learn and grow and become someone new. I thought maybe I could leave the war behind and build a different kind of life. She looked directly at Krekstar. But some people will not let others be peaceful. Some people think that kindness is the same thing as weakness. Some people need to learn that there is a difference between choosing not to fight and not knowing how to fight. The large Vorthix swallowed hard. I did not know. No, you did not know. But you also did not try to know. You saw a quiet human girl and decided she was an easy target. You never asked about my background or my experiences. You just assumed I was weak because I was different from you. Zara's voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath the words. Here is what you should know, Krextar. Every human who survived the integration conflicts has seen death and suffering that would break most minds. We learned to fight wars before we learned to fly between stars. We perfected the art of sacrifice before we figured out hyperspace technology. She gestured toward the memorial wall. These names represent humans who chose to die rather than let innocent people suffer. They were not failures or weaklings. They were heroes who paid the ultimate price to protect others. The silence stretched on for nearly a minute. Students looked at each other uncertainly, not knowing what to say or do. Finally, Professor Zenth spoke up. Miss Chun, why did you not tell anyone about your military service when you enrolled at the academy? Because I hoped I would not need to, Zara answered. I hoped I could just be a student like everyone else. I hoped that my past would not define my future. She looked around the crowd of alien faces one more time. But if anyone thinks that human compassion is the same thing as human weakness, they are welcome to test that theory. The rest of the museum visit passed in near silence. Students walked through the remaining exhibits quietly, occasionally glancing at Zara with expressions of awe, confusion, or newfound respect. Word of the confrontation spread through the entire group, and by the time they returned to the academy, every student on the field trip knew that the quiet human girl was actually a decorated war veteran. Over the next few days, life at Galactic Unity Academy changed dramatically for Zara. Students no longer avoided her in the hallways. Instead, many approached her with genuine curiosity about human culture and military history. They asked respectful questions about Earth, about the integration conflicts, and about what it was like to command soldiers in real battles. The Aquari students, led by Karohai, were especially interested in learning about human tactics and strategy. During lunch, they would sit with Zara and ask her to explain how human forces had managed to win battles against superior alien technology. We used what you might call unconventional methods. Zara explained to a group of curious students. Alien military doctrine focuses on overwhelming firepower and advanced technology. Human doctrine focuses on adaptability and creative problem-solving. Can you give us an example? Asked a young Zilla student who had previously ignored Zara completely. During the Battle of Titan's Ring, we were facing a Vorthic fleet that outnumbered us 5-1. Their ships had better shields, faster engines, and more powerful weapons than ours. The students leaned forward, listening intently. So we did something they did not expect. Instead of fighting them in open space where their advantages would matter, we retreated into Titan's asteroid belt. We used the asteroids as cover and turned the battle into a giant game of hide-and-seek. But how did you win? Korohai asked. We knew the asteroid field better than they did. Human pilots had been training there for years. We led the Vorthic ships deeper and deeper into the asteroids, where their large vessels could not maneuver properly. Then we attacked from multiple directions at once. Guerrilla warfare, Professor Zenth said, joining the conversation. Humans adapted ground-based fighting techniques for use in space combat. Very creative. Even some of the teachers had begun incorporating real human military case studies into their lessons. During advanced tactics class, Professor Kempf asked Zara to explain the strategic decisions made during the siege of Kepler 442. The colony was located on a planet with 3 moons, Zara explained to the class. The Vorthic fleet positioned themselves in orbit and began bombarding our defensive positions. Standard procedure would have been to evacuate the colony immediately. She walked to the front of the classroom and drew a simple diagram on the display board. But evacuation would have taken weeks, and we only had days before the bombardment destroyed the colony's infrastructure. So we made a different choice. What choice? Asked the student. We decided to hold the planet no matter what. 3,000 human Marines dug in and prepared for a siege. We used the underground mining tunnels as shelters and supply routes. We turned the entire colony into a fortress. The alien students looked skeptical. 3,000 Marines against 2 battle fleets? One asked. We had advantages that the orbital bombardment could not take away, Zara continued. We knew the terrain. We had the support of the local population. And we were fighting for our homes. How long did the siege last? Professor Kent asked. 6 months. The Vorthik tried everything. Orbital bombardment, ground assault, siege warfare, even biological weapons. But they could not break our defensive lines. The classroom was completely quiet. Even Professor Kent seemed impressed by the tactical details. In the end, the Vorthik fleet retreated. They had lost too many ships and too many soldiers trying to capture one small colony. The siege became a symbol of human determination throughout the galaxy. After class, several students surrounded Zara with more questions about military strategy and human fighting techniques. She answered them patiently, pleased that their interest was genuine and respectful rather than mocking. The biggest change was in Krekstar and his friends. The large Vorthik no longer harassed Zara or made jokes about human weakness. Instead, he seemed to go out of his way to avoid her completely. When their paths crossed in the hallways, he would nod politely and continue walking without saying anything. Thrum and Nexus had different reactions. Thrum approached Zara after a week and offered a sincere apology for his behavior. I was wrong about humans, the massive Gorlok said in his rumbling voice. My grandfather always told me stories about brave human soldiers, but I thought they were just tales to make the war seem more interesting. I did not realize I was talking to one of those soldiers. Your grandfather was right about human bravery, Zara replied. But he was also right about Gorlok honor. You are apologizing because you realized you made a mistake. That takes courage. Nexus took longer to come around. The crystalline alien seemed genuinely troubled by the revelation of Zara's military background. During their shared advanced physics class, he would steal glances at her when he thought she was not looking. Finally, 3 weeks after the museum incident, he approached her after class. I have been reading about the integration conflicts, he said without looking directly at her. About the battles you fought in. The tactical reports are impressive. Thank you, Zara said simply. I want to apologize for the things I said about humans. About you. I was wrong, and I'm sorry. Zara studied his angular crystalline features for a moment. Apology accepted, Nexus. Would you like to start over? From that point forward, Nexus became one of Zara's most enthusiastic supporters. He would correct other students when they made ignorant comments about human capabilities. And he often asked Zara for help with tactical problems in their shared classes. The most surprising change was in Zara herself. She no longer kept her head down when walking through the corridors. She participated actively in class discussions and offered to help other students who were struggling with their assignments. When new human students arrived at the academy, she was always there to welcome them and help them navigate their first days. One evening, while studying in the library, Karlhai asked her an important question. Do you regret revealing your military background? You said you wanted to be a normal student. Zara looked up from her homework and considered the question carefully. For a while, I thought being normal meant hiding who I was, she said. I thought I had to choose between being a soldier and being a student. But I was wrong. What do you mean? I learned that you cannot build something new by pretending the past never happened. My experiences in the war are part of who I am. They taught me things about leadership, about sacrifice, and about protecting others that I can use in peacetime too. She gestured around the library, where students from a dozen different species were studying together quietly. This academy is supposed to teach future leaders of the galaxy. Maybe my job here is not just to learn about other cultures, but to teach them about human values, about the idea that strength should be used to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Karahai smiled, her large eyes glowing with understanding. So you are still serving others, just in a different way. Exactly. The war is over, but the mission continues. We are building a better galaxy where different species can live together peacefully. That is worth fighting for, even if the fighting is done with words instead of weapons. Over the following months, Zara became an unofficial ambassador for human culture at the Academy. She organized cultural exchange events, helped resolve conflicts between different species students, and served as a mentor for younger students who were struggling to fit in. When graduation day arrived, Zara stood on the ceremony platform as the valedictorian of her class. Looking out at the audience filled with students, parents, and teachers from across the galaxy, she felt proud of what she had accomplished. But more importantly, she felt hopeful about the future. The young aliens she had studied with would go on to become leaders, diplomats, scientists, and teachers throughout the galaxy. They would carry with them a new understanding of what humans could contribute to galactic civilization. In her graduation speech, Zara talked about the importance of looking beyond surface differences to find the courage and wisdom that exists in all intelligent species. She spoke about the value of protecting those who cannot protect themselves, and about the responsibility that comes with strength. As she concluded her speech, Zara looked directly at Krextar, who was sitting in the audience with his family. The large Vorthek nodded respectfully and joined the enthusiastic applause. After the ceremony, many students and families approached Zara to thank her for her service during the war and her leadership at the Academy. But the comment that meant the most came from Professor Zenth. Miss Chun, the elderly crystalline teacher, said, "You came here hoping to learn how to be something other than a soldier. I think you succeeded, but not in the way you expected." "What do you mean, Professor?" "You learned that the best soldiers never really stop serving others. They just find new ways to fight for what matters. You will make an excellent leader, whether you choose a military career or not." That night, as Zara packed her belongings to leave the Academy, she found herself thinking about the memorial wall at the museum.